setting a little context for the launch of this manifesto today. This was truly a team effort, and I really want to recognize all the critical stakeholders, the critical functionaries who played a part in putting this very important document, pointing the way forward for Jamaica and the Jamaican people. Firstly, to recognize all my colleagues at the head table, led of course by the party leader and Honorable Prime Minister, who contributed significantly their thoughts, their ideas, working with their respective teams in charge of their respective portfolios. They have played a critical role. Secondly, there's a smaller team which I chair with critical functionaries who helped in the process of pulling the ideas together, consulting where consultation had to take place. And I want to just recognize them. I don't like to single people out, but I really want to recognize Senator Kamina Johnson for the critical role that she has played. The Honorable Prime Minister and Party Leader has given an overview, but just again by way of context, I'm going to just spend 10 minutes or so to go through some of the critical areas, focusing on some critical portfolio functions, and then we will allow the media and any other to ask questions, and those questions will be directed, if not at the Honorable Prime Minister or myself, certainly at the respective portfolio functionaries and ministers who are seated behind me. Firstly, the manifesto, of course, is a statement of intent, and specifically, we want to communicate our broad objectives and desired outcomes for Jamaica and the Jamaican people. In developing the manifesto, we began with our commitment to making Jamaica the place to live, to work, to do business, and to raise families. Prime Minister emphasized that. From there, we aim to identify the framework and the pathways to achieving this very important vision. For us in the Labour Party, our people, again emphasized by the Honorable Prime Minister, our greatest asset. And for us, our people are integral to the success of any plans and programs aimed at taking Jamaica forward. The party, therefore, will outline a number of critical areas of opportunities and a framework for enhancing the development of our human potential to identify and to take advantage of those critical opportunities. We have to, however, as we have always said, place our plans and programs in the context of a wider environment. Oftentimes, and to a large extent, our detractors like to criticize without context. They fail to recognize, oftentimes, for example, the legacy that we inherited as a party when we took office in September 2007, and have since, more often than not, within the discussions that they have had, failed to recognize the crisis, the challenges that we have had to confront in the global economy, and how, therefore, we have had to manage those critical challenges as we move forward. This manifesto represents a continuation of the successful undertakings that we have identified a week ago. We will continue those programs and expand on those programs. That document is already public knowledge. In addition, our new policies and strategies which are aligned to the Vision 2030 and the PIOJ's gross inducement strategy. In addition to that, our recognition, and very important recognition, of the need to be fiscally responsible. In other words, not to plan on what we don't have, which has been the source of our challenges as a country over many, many years. We hope to continue working with the diligent and hardworking members of the civil service, we have outlined that clearly, and other stakeholders to identify and implement good ideas and programs without bias. Once we believe these ideas will serve the interests of the Jamaican people. We would like to note that the manifesto is not entirely exhaustive. It is a fairly large document, 132 pages, But running a country involves a lot more than what contains in these 132 pages. It's intended to highlight the critical, very critical areas. In that respect, the document is available online, the party's website, as well as in hard copy. And we want to make an appeal to Jamaicans, to all the stakeholder groups who have a mind to read, to comment, to give suggestions. We don't claim to be the authority on knowledge, but we believe we have a good idea as to where we need to go, and we have demonstrated that over the last 4 years. Having said that, it is a process, and that process has to continue. So we invite you to look and to make comments and suggestions where necessary. What we propose to do this morning quickly is to focus on a few of the critical areas. Firstly, finance, job creation, health, and education. Obviously, a lot more is contained in the document, and you're welcome to raise any other area if you so please. In the area of finance, we want to just raise 3 critical points. Firstly, the ongoing agreement with the IMF that we have been party to, which expires on May 2012. The party is quite clear that this is an agreement that we signed on to. It is not just about the IMF, it is about the government of the day engaging in discussions and agreeing to a program. That program has 6 months to run, and our commitment is to continue with that program until the program expires in 2012. We take note of the People's National Party's position of renegotiating that agreement. We think it is highly impractical and unrealistic, and certainly not possible within that 6-month time frame. And we'd certainly like the Jamaican people to ask them how exactly they would achieve that given the time period for this agreement to be completed. Having said that, we do recognize that that agreement is a framework, and that discussions with the IMF are ongoing and subject to adjustments within the context of both parties having dialogue. And so that process of fluidity and flexibility will continue, but the radical proposal of an adjustment and renegotiating, we think, is impractical and, frankly speaking, an attempt to get some additional votes with very little substance attached to it. In terms of tax reform and pension reform, we take note of the PNP's manifesto that they would address those 2 critical areas. We agree with them that there are, in fact, very fundamental areas to move this country forward. However, we are dealing with those critical areas, and therefore the PNP's proposal, positioned in a manner as if the government is not currently addressing those areas, is again an attempt to deceive, and we want to clarify that clearly. It is a redundant statement, and frankly speaking, what they should have been saying in their manifesto is that they support the government of the day's position concerning tax reform and pension reform. A green paper for both tax and pension reform has been tabled and are under discussion with our stakeholders, and we invite the opposition to join us in that discussion and let us demonstrate a unity of purpose in dealing with these 2 critical areas. We are committed to that process, and that process is ongoing. In terms of the macroeconomic indicators, we have said, and others have said, independent, objective minds, organizations, entities, have said that this administration has done an admirable job in managing the macroeconomic environment of this country under very difficult circumstances. Audley Shaw has led that process. We have created a stable and strong macroeconomic environment. Interest rates are the lowest they have been in 30 years. The PNP cannot claim anywhere close to that level of success. The dollar is strong and stable. We have single-digit inflation. And the alignment of these indicators will provide for us, we think, the platform for investment and job creation across our country. Again, another achievement that cannot be claimed by the opposition, despite what they put in their manifesto. In fact, the economy has started to show the results of that macroeconomic stability. We have seen 3 quarters so far of improvement, and it therefore sets the stage for the second term under the Jamaica Labour Party to move the process forward. As it relates to the divestments of assets, again, another redundant statement in the PNP's manifesto. That is an ongoing process. The party is well on the way to getting rid of assets that we have said from the start in 2007 that there are some things that government ought not to be involved in. In fact, many of those things that we're involved in, we were placed there by the former administration at tremendous cost to the taxpayers of Jamaica. And despite what they say, the evidence is there to show. Air Jamaica and the Sugar Company of Jamaica are 2 very tangible examples of assets that were once owned by the government, heavily subsidized by the taxpayers of Jamaica, with monies that could have been used to repair roads and hospitals and schools. This government, over 4 years, has demonstrated a commitment to divesting assets. It therefore says that we have shown the lead on this, not what the PNP proposes, but what we have been doing. And the commitment in this manifesto is to continue. We have a divestment policy. We have a list of entities that are publicly known that are placed up for divestment. That process will continue in the next term. Job creation is a very topical issue. And there's a lot to be said about job creation by commentators and, of course, by the opposition as to what they would do. First of all, it's important for us to outline and the Jamaican people to recognize that until we get the environment right for investment, it is a difficult call to facilitate and enhance investment. We are the ones who have gotten that environment to where it is, which is the best, as I said earlier, that has been for the last 20, 30 years, not the People's National Party. And therefore, I think we should be given more credit, or given the credit for setting the stage to create the type of private sector-driven investments that are necessary to move the program, the process forward. We have taken note of the progressive agenda and the G program, and then the manifesto. And frankly speaking, there are again some impracticalities in those proposals. First of all, we have seen from the 1970s that crash program does not work. It leaves the taxpayers of the country with a huge bill and very little to show for it. As far as we're concerned, the PNP's Jeep program is nothing short of another crash program that they want to revisit on this country, which they had practiced from the 1970s. In addition to that, the proposal about using the JDIP funds or renegotiating JDIP in order to create jobs. You know, the best way that the JDIP funds can be used to create jobs is being practiced now, which is to build critical infrastructure which creates jobs and at the same time creates good infrastructure to boost the productive sector throughout the country. There's no renegotiation that is necessary at that level. But there are other critical issues that we have to recognize as we move to creating jobs. Firstly, we have to recognize the environment. It's difficult to make a promise and to commit numbers in a sort of finite way on jobs that you will create when all the variables are not within your control. You can do what you can, and we can outline that, and we have actually outlined that in the manifesto in terms of specific areas. But there are other variables that we have to consider, like the global economy. In fact, when you look at the projections for the global economy, all the analysts have predicted that it will continue to slow. We are part of a network society. We're part of a global environment, and we are impacted by that global environment. Having said that, as will be shown in the manifesto, there are critical areas of expansion, like tourism, that have done very well based